Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three martinis coming up.
Hey, so glad you're with us for the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Happy Reagan's birthday to all who celebrate, which Jim and I most certainly do. Grab a handful of jelly beans somewhere today and celebrate supply-side economics, winning the Cold War, and just American greatness all around. So we do have three good martinis today. You know, Reagan was a very positive guy. So let's do three martinis today. That's just the way the news happened to fall today. We didn't do that intentionally in honor of Reagan, but we're going to look at Trump's...
We could make February 6th All Good News Day. We could just decide from now on for Reagan's birthday, there will only be good news on February 6th.
That's right. He always saw a brighter future ahead for our country, and I would love to have that optimism most days, but today we can actually do that. And so we're going to be looking at Trump's executive order, common sense on, banning men from women's sports. We're going to be looking at Pam Bondi's first full day on the job at the Justice Department, which is very different than the previous Justice Department. And we're going to take a look at hopefully some sanity coming into place in a couple of state political issues. So first, we're going to tell you all about Omaha Steaks. Omaha Steaks is like almost a party in our house because we're so excited when they come. We're so excited when Mrs. Columbus puts them on the menu. The steaks are always terrific. The burgers are always terrific. You know you're always dealing with a fantastic cut of meat. And Mrs. Columbus, of course, works her magic. But even if you don't have a lot of culinary magic to work with, they give you stuff to marinate and to do other things with, other ideas to cook it to perfection. And again, USDA certified tender. But the deal right now is to visit omahasteaks.com/3ml and get 12 free burgers and free shipping for the life of your subscription. So that's on every order, plus an extra 10% off today and on every subsequent subscription shipment. So make life easier by subscribing to the very best. Subscribe to Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com/3ml and get 12 free burgers and free shipping for the life of your subscription, plus an extra 10% off today and on every subsequent subscription shipment. omahasteaks.com/3ml. All right, Jim, on to our first good martini now. And President Trump has obviously signed a flurry of executive orders here as the presidency has begun 2.5 weeks in. There's been dozens and dozens of them. Yesterday was perhaps one of the most prominent. This one wasn't done at the Oval Office desk. This one was done out at a very public event where he signed an executive order banning men from women's sports.
In a few moments, I'll sign a historic executive order to ban men from competing in women's sports. It's about time. Under the Trump administration, we will defend the proud tradition of female athletes, and we will not allow men to beat up, injure, and cheat our women and our girls. From now on, women's sports will be only for women.
And this was perhaps one of the best photo ops you'll ever see. He's signing it at the desk. He asked for all these girls, young girls who play soccer and all this stuff, to surround the desk. And he's loving every minute of it. He's like, I don't think the Secret Service is going to have to worry about this, even though it wasn't part of the plan. And he signed it. The NCAA is already saying, okay, this is happening. We might need some legal clarification on some things, but obviously we're going to honor this executive order. But the other thing that a lot of people are talking about, and I think this was clear for years, Jim, but nobody wanted to admit it in the media or on the left, and that's that this was a lopsided issue that Americans were overwhelmingly in favor of all along, but the Democrats kind of got hung up focusing on their fringe rather than even their own base on this particular issue. And you had people like Martina Navratilova, who is far left on everything, including the L, the G, and the B, but not the T. She has been very clear about how men do not belong in women's sports, and she tweeted out yesterday, I hate that the Democrats totally failed women and girls on this very clear issue of women's sports being for females only. Jim, there aren't many issues that are going to be more common sense and obvious than this. The Democrats completely fumbled the ball, and they've given Trump one of the brightest moments of his presidency.
Greg, I've been thinking about how Trump went from a presidential loser in 2020 to a presidential winner in 2024, and also not only winning the popular vote, winning all the swing states. What caught? Because in the end, he's basically the same guy. yeah, maybe he emphasizes some issues than others, and certainly the arguments about the deep state, the arguments about the prosecutions of him, like there were new factors that were added to it. But in the end, he's basically the same guy with basically the same views, and the American public changed its view of Donald Trump. And the question is why? What happened? Well, I think what happens is the Democrats changed. And I don't recall Joe Biden. Look, 2020, the pandemic's going on. There's a lot of other issues going on. But I don't think Joe Biden had said, I am going to make sure that those who are born male can participate in women's sports and can participate in women's locker rooms and changing rooms and places like that. And if he had done that, if he explicitly, they always put it in like, the most generic terms possible, ensuring equality for transgender citizens or some sort of, they actually talk about what the policies are. Well, that's when it turns into this 80-20 issue or 85-15 in some cases. If you're a Democrat and you've managed to alienate Martina Navratilova on an issue of women's sports, like that's really, you can argue celebrities, why do we care about their viewpoints? But I think, she knows a thing or two about women's athletics. You should, reevaluate how you've gotten here. And, they really seem to think that they were going to figure out to persuade America that seeing a, born male, much larger, much more masculine swimmer competing alongside actual, and the younger you get with this, the more outraged parents get, the more outraged fathers of daughters don't want this to happen. So, in the end, the Democrats handed Trump a very big win. We had this little bit of a comment from Seth Moulton, the congressman from Massachusetts, saying maybe we should, a lot of parents don't want boys competing in girls' sports, and there were huge protests, and all kinds of local lawmakers came out and denounced him. And it was not quite the Salem witch trials, although Salem is in his district. But it was like burn the witch was only a mild exaggeration of that. The Democrats in the end aren't ready to deal with how the American people actually feel on this. And you talk about, was it epistemic closure? Or just the idea of being in a bubble and all that stuff. Democrats were in that 15 to 20% who are absolutely convinced the American public agrees with them.
No, it's absolutely crazy. And there was another vote on a related issue in the House in this early part of the new session. Seth Moulton voted against it again. So I don't know whether he got bullied by the protests or he was just trying to talk a good game after the election and make it seem like he had a rational thought in his body. But I don't know. But this is just
Greg,
an obvious policy. Yeah,
Greg, he doesn't want to get burned at the stake. Look, at one point they said they throw him into the river tied up, if he floats, he's not hostile to transgender rights. But if he sinks, then he is. No, actually, I'm sorry, other way around. So the only way to prove that he's not hostile to transgender rights was to float to the bottom of the river. So, yeah. Everyone looking up their Scarlet Letter and it was the Crucible. Pardon me,
Crucible.
The Arthur Miller Crucible.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that takes me back to junior year of high school. Mrs. Bunnan reading the Crucible right out of the gate. Boy, that was some interesting stuff. This is just amazing how much momentum this other side got, and it finally took common sense in this last election to really move momentum in the other way. I wouldn't say the fight is over yet, but between this executive order and the one on transgender hormone therapy and surgeries for minors, things are definitely moving in the right direction. And the amount of courage it actually took to stand up to this, because the media and the Democrats, were just shoving this in our face all the time. Dylan Mulvaney, cost Bud Light their market share. Mm-hmm. But people like J.K. Rowling and Riley Gaines and other people just stepping up and getting the job done. And so good for President Trump and good for Martina Navratilova. She took a lot of heat from Billie Jean King, who created the women's tennis tour, was defending the transgender inclusion of men in women's sports. It was insane. But for those who fought the good fight here, congratulations. Let's hope the momentum keeps going. All right, let's talk about NetSuite by Oracle, because your business is hopefully off to a good start in 2025, but you just never know what the different conditions are going to bring. So the best thing you can do is be prepared for no matter what happens. And for more than 38,000 businesses, they've future-proofed their operations with NetSuite by Oracle, the leading cloud ERP platform. It integrates key business functions like accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one seamless system.
Whether your company is small or earning hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Closing your books in days instead of weeks means you spend less time dealing with the past and more time focusing on future growth.
Business experts will tell you you need these tools in place. Back in the day, you had to take care of it yourself. Now, you don't have to, and it frees you up to do what you really want to be doing and what you do best. So get NetSuite by Oracle. Plus, right now, you can download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/martini. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/martini. That's netsuite.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our second good martini today. And it was just earlier this week that former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi was confirmed by the U.S. Senate. She was sworn in as Attorney General by Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. And yesterday, Wednesday, was her first full day on the job. And the very first thing she did is cut off funding for sanctuary cities. New York Post with the story. Newly inaugurated Attorney General Pam Bondi ordered the defunding of jurisdictions that refuse to cooperate with federal immigration authorities. And since this is the New York Post, it points out potentially cutting off a significant money source for New York. She says, quote, "The Department of Justice will ensure that, consistent with law, sanctuary jurisdictions do not receive access to federal funds from the department." Other sanctuary states include California and Connecticut, while major cities such as Chicago, Philadelphia, and yes, Washington, D.C. also have such policies. The Post does point out that a relatively small share of funding flows from the Justice Department to New York States and local governments, but the declaration could further pinch budgets already tightened to provide housing and services for the surge of migrants that's already taken place. So, Jim, we'll see what impact this does have. But as we've seen from the audits of different parts of our government, scrutiny on money gets the attention of Democrats, and hopefully it does here, and we get a little more cooperation.
Well, like in our first martini, this is another one where the remaining elected Democratic officials, and in particular the mayors of these cities, have to think hard. Look hard at what your priorities are. Think about what you really want to do here, because you can continue to say, I will not agree, I will resist, we will never cooperate with immigration and customs enforcement, we will never cooperate with, border enforcement. No, we're never going to do any of that stuff. Or you can do what the mayor of Denver did, where he said he was going to send out the cops to stop ICE agents, and then realizing what he had done, backtracked very quickly, and was very quick to emphasize, we will cooperate on violent criminals. I think at minimum, that should be the minimum opening bid of any big city Democratic mayor, or small cities, any size cities. That at minimum, you got to say, we're going to go out there and we want to get every, serious criminal offender off the streets. If you want to be less cooperative on the ones who haven't committed a violent crime, maybe your constituents are going to stick with you on that. But let's make an observation. Do you know what illegal immigrants can't do, Greg?
Vote.
Vote.
Well, at least they're not supposed to.
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while you find one. There was that guy up in China voted in Minnesota. It was a Chinese citizen who voted in Minnesota earlier this year, or last year. But the point being that, there can't be that many votes, for this. I'm sure there are some U.S. citizens in American cities who think that we should not be doing these ICE raids. Probably the ones employing them, and probably the ones paying them less than the minimum wage under the table and all that stuff. But the bottom line, you can either you can cooperate with enforcing the country's laws, or you can say, I'm not going to cooperate with this and remain your status in a sanctuary city. Look, the reaction of D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, the reaction of Eric Adams up in New York, the mayor brought to you by Turkish Airlines, is that if you that they loved being a sanctuary city right up until the moment it cost them. Right up until the moment they actually had to take care of those people because they were getting come up by the busloads from border states like Texas and sometimes from Florida and all that stuff. All of a sudden, they didn't want to be sanctuary cities anymore. And D.C. Mayor Bowser had lamented that, look, we don't have the resources for this. We're not a border state city. Like El Paso is awash in extra money to take care of migrants coming across the border, right? So I think a little more push on this, and you're going to see more folding, with certain exceptions like, say, Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, who has a remarkable ability to make the wrong decision no matter what the options are put in front of her.
Yeah, everybody talks a good game till their money starts drying up. And so we'll see if this makes a big difference. And so thousands have already been deported. And hopefully the highest target illegals, the ones that are a menace to their communities or the communities they're currently living in, can be deported quickly and we can keep them out. So that would be an important part, too. But Pam Bondi, not a surprise she's doing this. She was very clear during her confirmation hearings what her priorities would be. And this is certainly one of the biggest priorities of the Trump administration. And so well done on day one. All right, let's talk about BetterHelp. This edition of the 3 Martini Lunch is brought to you by BetterHelp. And what are some of your relationship red flags? What are your green flags? In addition to wanting to keep away the people who aren't good for you, you want to have people around you that are good for you. And so being able to figure out who those people are critical as well. And whether you need help with that or you just want some more clarity, try BetterHelp. They can give you some more help.
BetterHelp is fully online. It makes therapy affordable and convenient and serves more than 5 million people worldwide. You can access a diverse network of more than 30,000 credentialed therapists with a wide range of specialties. And you can easily switch therapists anytime at no extra cost.
Discover your relationship green flags with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/3ML to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/3ML. All right, Jim, we got a twofer, combination of stories here for this final Good Martini. And we start in Minnesota, where a couple of weeks ago we highlighted the fact that the Minnesota House of Representatives was basically non-functioning because the margin was 67 to 66 with a special election scheduled originally for January 28th, but that didn't happen. It's been pushed back to March. And so because Democrats were expected to win that seat, which would have made it 67-67, they were refusing to show up for work in the Minnesota State House of Representatives. The Secretary of State would come in, gavel in. There would not be a quorum, gavel out, nothing gets done. Republicans wanted to set up their majority. Democrats saying, no, wait till this election comes and you might not have the majority. In fact, you probably won't. Well, Tim Walz has set the special election for March 11th. But in the meantime, there appears to be a power sharing agreement. And we don't know a lot of the details yet, but the Republicans will get their speaker, Lisa DeMuth, and at least run one committee that I'm seeing online, Jim, and that would be the one that heads up investigations, which is pretty significant in the state legislature. So I'm guessing as the day unfolds, we're going to get more details about how this will work. But we've already lost basically a month of business here in the Minnesota House of Representatives. And if the Democrats had originally gotten their way, it would have been into mid-March before they had a chance to set this up, and then 2 months would have been lost of the people's business. Also, very quickly, up in New York, Elise Stefanik is expected to be confirmed as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. She will then resign her House seat, and Democrats had been playing fast and loose with the law that mandates that you set a special election no later than 90 days past the resignation. But they had been talking about just lining it up with the next primary, which would be June 24th. But apparently, Democrats in New York are backing down on that due to the backlash. So hopefully that ends up being the case as well. So what do you make of what we're seeing in Minnesota and New York?
Well, in Minnesota, I'm reminded of a Chris Rock routine way back in the post-Reagan years, probably late 80s, early 90s. And he talked about the state of Minnesota. And he said, the only black people in the state of Minnesota are Prince and Kirby Puckett of the Minnesota Twins. Well, now we can add the new Speaker of the State House, the first African-American speaker in the Minnesota State House. So, kudos for that. It's just a shame that white supremacists like Tim Walz and the other Minnesota Democrats could never get around to do something like that. Look, it's nice to know if you're from Minnesota, your state legislator is working for you 11 months out of the year. Not counting any vacations or stuff like that. They're dedicated to that. Regarding this other one, first of all, we know Republicans have a very slim majority in the House. They got 2 seats right now. Stefanik, at some point, I suspect this is one of the reasons they haven't brought this nomination to the floor of the Senate. She got confirmed by the committee a week ago. Once you got to quit one job before you can get sworn in for the other job. So she's going to have to do this at some point, or else we don't have the administration's preferred choice working as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. So when she does that, that takes it down to 1 seat. Nobody sneeze. Nobody throw their back out. Nobody have any delayed flights. Don't. If somebody has the flu, stay away. Right? It's a 1-seat majority there, and it was under state law. You have to do a special election within 90 days. That's a little longer than I would like, but that's all right. If that's the state law, that's the state law. Well, that's just too soon for House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. And apparently some Democrats in the New York State Legislature, they want to rewrite it. Maybe we'll hold it on the June 24th primary date, around the middle of the year, deep into summer, or even the general election in November. Now, Greg, how many times in the last 4, 8, 9, 10 decades have you heard Democrats saying Republicans are attacking democracy?
All the time.
It's a trick question. No, even scientists cannot count that high. That's the numbers don't exist for that many times, right? And now the Democrats are getting together. Literally, a shadowy cabal of powerful elites are saying, how far can we put off this special election, and how long can we keep the 21st District in New York without a representative? Like, it is shockingly, even by the standards of typical hypocrisy and shamelessness of Democrats, this is really bad. Well, there's been enough of an outcry that they said this plan is, quote, on pause. So it looks like it'll be within 90 days. Still feels like a long time to have that. The 90-day clock can't start until there's an official declaration of the vacancy, which can't happen until she resigns the seat. The other thing is also on the other side, we have 2 special House elections on April 1st. Get all your April Fool's Day jokes for Matt Gaetz, in here. So by April 1st, Republicans will have at least 2 more guys, and it'll end up being a little bit smoother. So, I mean, maybe the plan is to have her put off her resignation as late as possible, but it's just kind of frustrating. This is one of the consequences of that. Good news in Minnesota, and at least so far looks like not worse news in New York.
Just a couple of thoughts on each of these. First of all, the Minnesota situation makes me want to say you need an odd number of people in your chamber, an odd number of seats, so there's always a majority. Now, if you're in the Senate, where there's 2 seats for each state, you're obviously going to have an even number, but you got a vice president to break the ties. Here in Virginia, we got the lieutenant governor to break ties in the state Senate, so you're always going to have a situation where you're not at a deadlock. If you don't have that tiebreaker, have an odd number of seats. It makes things so much easier. As for New York and the different machinations that Hakeem Jeffries and others were trying to pull off, reminds me of a couple of things. Number one, when Frank Lautenberg died and Chris Christie scheduled the Senate special election for like 2 or 3 weeks earlier than his own reelection, because he didn't want the Cory Booker race on the same ballot with him, because he apparently thought that could affect his reelection. But the one that's the most infuriating is Massachusetts. Back in 2004, Mitt Romney was the governor of Massachusetts while John Kerry was running for president of the United States. And because it looked like John Kerry had a decent shot of winning, the Democrats who dominated the legislature said, oh, no. We don't want Mitt Romney naming the replacement for John Kerry, so we're going to take away that ability for him to do that. There's going to be a special election. The governor is not going to make an immediate appointment. There's going to be a little bit of a vacancy. There's going to be a special election. It's out of the governor's hands now. Well, John Kerry lost, so that nothing really happened, but the law still changed. Fast forward to 2009, Ted Kennedy dies. There's a Democratic governor, Deval Patrick, but the law said that there had to be a break, a campaign, and a special election. Well, now that there's a Democratic governor, no. We're going to change the law back after Kennedy died. So then Deval Patrick makes an appointment. There is a special election a few months later. But the political motivation for changing these things is nothing new.
So I would observe, I actually kind of like having special elections on really odd dates. Obviously turnout is very low when you do that, but it also means that seats that are like gerrymandered to be, absolutely iron, clad, unlosable races. Republicans represented Anthony Weiner's district for a year and a half because Anthony Weiner, that's why. And also in Hawaii, a very Democratic state, I think by some measures the most Democratic state in the country. Charles Juju, am I remembering his name correctly and pronouncing it correctly? We had a Republican congressman from Hawaii. And I think they had we got this guy won. And there were 2 Democrats and it was him and he had won it was really weird, unique circumstances. But I kind of like that, the fact that even the most seemingly safe seat can be won by the other party in the right kind of circumstances, and at least makes things competitive. It gets rid of this kind of entrenched one-party states and entrenched one-party regions of states. So I certainly have no problem with holding special. And also I think it's not a good idea. If you write to the empty seat congressional office, there are still some staffers there answering the phones. They're trying to help you with Social Security stuff, but for obvious reasons, people like having a member of Congress representing them and voting on legislation. We should probably try to minimize the amount of time that these seats remain empty. And, this kind of shenanigans and nonsense from Jeffries is inexcusable.
Exactly. Now, there eventually was a special election early in 2010 to replace Ted Kennedy, won by Scott Brown. Remember,
That's right.
41? I'll be 41 in the Senate because Martha Coakley is a historically awful candidate. But in the meantime, because they changed
Who are
that
these
law,
Red Sox characters? Kurt Schilling, who's he? He's probably a Yankee fan. Yes,
But in the meantime, because
this is like calling Michael Jordan a Knicks fan, right? I mean, it's just
But in the meantime, because they changed that law after Ted Kennedy died, mind you, and the governor, Deval Patrick, was able to make the appointment, they got the 60 votes they needed to move on Obamacare. So that decision, that chicanery at the state level had a huge impact on all of us. So, Jim, quite a day. Glad we could have all three good martinis, and we'll hopefully do it again tomorrow.
we probably shouldn't get used to this, but nonetheless, I will see you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you don't already and tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a fantastic Thursday. Join us again on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.